100% unequivocally, the answer is yes, you can make a living practicing animal law.
Welcome to the Animal Law Podcast. We're going to be doing something totally different this month, and it's really important. And I'm really thrilled that Cheryl Leahy, you probably know Cheryl if you know her, and you probably do from her years heading up Animal Outlook, but she is here as the director of the Animal Law Practice Association, which is really exciting. This is a new impetus from the Brooks Institute for Animal Law and Policy, and it's going to train more and more lawyers who care about animals to start working for them and finding their way to do that, maybe starting a new practice, maybe adding some animal law topics to the practice they're already in, maybe some other ideas as well. And we need as many lawyers as we can get, because it's my opinion that, I wouldn't say this if I didn't believe it, that lawyers are doing more than anybody right now to advance the cause. I think it's pretty important. So this is going to help them, and it's just starting out. We have a few topics. They're going to have 10 billion, from what I can tell from their website. So it's exciting, and we're going to talk about what they're doing so far and what the plans are. Just a quick reminder about the Our Hen House podcast, Rising Anxieties Tuesdays, Hen Report Thursdays, long form interview including this one on Fridays. Bonus for Flock members comes out on Mondays. And we're a podcast. We're on YouTube. Please subscribe and hit like wherever you listen. And now, welcome, Cheryl.
Thank you. It's great to be back on, and unusual for me not talking about undercover investigations as I usually do.
Right. That a whole new topic. Now you're talking about absolutely everything.
Right. The whole universe.
All right, let's start. I mean, I've already overwhelmed people and myself. So let's start with the elevator speech. What is the Animal Law Practice Association, and who is it for?
Yeah, so the Animal Law Practice Association, or ALPA we call it, is a program at the Brooks Institute for Animal Rights Law and Policy, which I'm sure many of your listeners are familiar with. The ALPA program is focused on the practice of animal law. And it is basically looking at the question of how can we take the field from a few hundred lawyers that we have now? What if we could make it a few thousand or tens of thousands? And how can we do that with high quality and mentorship and the written practical resources needed to take people from being interested in this work, but not really knowing how to get started or how to take it on? And get them to feel very confident in their skills and do it well.
Yeah, and if this works, it could change everything. All right, let's just get a brief description of the different aspects of the association. First, tell us about the library. I mean, you alluded to it, but give us a little bit more on the library of written resources, and then we'll actually get into real specifics later on.
Yeah, so there's two basic parts of the anatomy of the program, right? One, as you just said, is the written resource library. So we are looking at topics that are very important to animal law, and I'm very intentional with the definition of animal law being very broad, right? Not only laws that were intended or drafted or conceptualized to help animals, but laws that can impact animals. So that really broadens the list of things, and I think reflects the creativity of the people who practice in this field and have over the years. So the written resource library is, again, practical resources take you kind of A to Z on a given topic through what do you need to know, what are the things, what is the law, what is the key cases, but also what do people practicing in this area have to say about it? What do they want you to know if you're coming into this newly, or you want to be thinking, maybe this is an area that generally you understand, but you have not looked at how to protect animal interests, how to think about the animal in this context. So, for example, we just did FOIA, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more. And we went all the way from, preparing to file your FOIA requests all the way through to appeals and fee motions and everything. We do like to really reflect, and it's very important to me that we have sort of the wisdom and the expertise reflected of the existing practitioners in the materials that we have. But we'll also have things like checklists, templates, sample case materials, filings, et cetera, really trying to equip people to do this work.
Yeah, I have only glimpsed at the FOIA section, not with the eye of somebody who's actually going to go out and file anything, but just to find out. It's unbelievably detailed. I mean, it would be incredibly helpful. And so the other, and we'll get into more of that later, but the other aspect, you said there were two, and the other is the community aspect. Is that right?
Correct. So the idea is we have a ton of people already practicing animal law in some capacity. I mean, it's interesting when you think you kind of guess how many people are out there practicing animal law. You might think it's 100 or 200. My estimate right now is it's about 600 in the United States that are practicing animal law significantly, if not full time. So we're looking at building the networks first with that sort of practice experience represented, the mentorship that comes into that, the potential co-counsel, the cross-referral opportunities, all of the kind of cross-pollination of ideas that can come with that. But then as we build, we want to bring people in from non-animal law fields. There are so many people out there who are interested in animal law. And what's so interesting to me, the more that I looked into this too and talked with people, is that we started hearing the same concerns, questions, interest areas, regardless of whether the person had been practicing animal law for 40 years or were just getting into it now, right? Whether they were experienced lawyers or not, right? They have the same kinds of interests, the same kinds of questions. We also started hearing from like law firms about what their associates want to do for pro bono, saying animal law is very popular, even maybe the top area of interest. We heard from the state and local and the ABA TIPS Animal Law Committee that there's just so much interest in this area. Most of those state and local bar associations or bar association sections or committees that focus on animal law do not include people who are practicing animal law, right? So they're just passionate about the issue.
Right.
They want to put their time. I mean, lawyers are very busy. The fact that they're putting their time into volunteering to do this work or just wanting to learn more about it, I think really says a lot for how much interest there is. So my opinion and the way we kind of look at this is there's a lot already out there. There's a lot of interest. There's a lot of talent and skill. And the things that lawyers already are doing in their, whatever their practice discipline is, could be applied to animals in a way that is not really being, kind of the opportunity is not being grasped at this time. So we want to be able to help that.
Yeah, you had mentioned before, like that because of the work that's already been done by animal lawyers, there's just been an enormous amount of creativity. Probably because people were forced to be creative because the law is so unfriendly to animals. So you had to find ways in. But really, there are very few areas of the law that you cannot find some connection that would benefit animals. So there are many not only people who might want to help animals, but opportunities, no matter where their practice area is, that they might be able to do. Now, who is eligible to join? And I guess this is a good moment to just tell people how they can join.
Yeah, so you can go to the Animal Law Practice Association website, which is on the Brooks Institute page. Actually, if you just Google Animal Law Practice Association, it shows up. And it is free to join. Everything about being a member is free, all the resources, the networking support. We will be building out a forum very soon. We'll be just kind of continuing to build. We want to be kind of a central. We have a very non-competitive mindset. We're not trying to duplicate efforts. We're not trying to compete with anybody. We want to kind of platform what's going on. We want to be sort of that central hub for people. So all of that is available to you. And yes, you just have to be a U.S. licensed attorney who is either practicing animal law or interested in doing it in some capacity in a way that advances the interests of animals. So when you go to probably the most work to get started is just filling out the application, which is the reason we are somewhat detailed in the application is because it's going to then be reflected on your profile page for other people to look at. And it will say, hey, I'm open to being contacted. I'm open to being a mentor, or I'm looking for a mentor. These are the areas of law that I practice. These are the types of cases that I've worked on. This is what I'm interested in. So it's up to you how detailed you want to be, but it's sort of like, here you go. This is who I am and who I'm looking to talk to. But baseline, you want to help animals, and you're a lawyer that's licensed somewhere in the U.S.
Yeah, and I love the point that you emphasize a lot in the material is this is not competitive. You're not trying to compete with any other organizations. You're trying to provide information for whoever is out there who wants to use it. But we haven't gotten to the most important question yet. And I think this is the question that drives a lot of what you're doing here. Can you make a living?
Every single person.
As your grandmother used to
100
say, but can you make a living?
Right, right. Is this a real job? Like every single person I talk to. So I talk to many, many people, from the inception of the program to now about what we could do to be helpful. We're always sort of open to feedback. What are the ideas that are going on? Why aren't there, more people practicing in this area? What are the barriers? 100% of the people said, there aren't enough jobs. How do you make money doing this? What is the formula that works, right? And I think we have to recognize, again, if we look at animal law, define it broadly, that there are a lot of people already doing it. Nobody has to do this from whole cloth. You can, right? There's still enough opportunity to be creative, but 100% unequivocally, the answer is yes, you can make a living practicing animal law. So this practice models module that we are in the very end editing stages of now was meant to be a very detailed assessment of how does one, actually make money and what are the business models that can kind of marry the meaningful work for animals with a sustainable and sometimes even lucrative law career. I think there's a big myth that people have that animal law is practiced only in pro bono context or only as nonprofit or sort of, solo or boutique animal law firms. That's not true. There's animal law being practiced in every single type of legal setting and every role you can think of, and at every income level, at every risk appetite, at every level of kind of, all the way from formulaic to very novel and creative, right? It comes down to, you have to know yourself and you have to know what kind of your bottom lines are. And we give you a lot of guidance in how you kind of go through that process.
And you're not just talking about somebody who wants to go out and start their own firm. I mean, you can be in big law and want to stay in big law and make the big bucks. And you can take your pro bono cases. But I think the point that you make so strongly is no matter what size your firm is, there are potentially paying animal law cases that people need lawyers for, that you can expand your practice, without like learning an entirely new area of law.
Yeah, and I will even go further than that. I'll say, and if we think about this as a pie chart, right, you would say there are cases that sort of your private, what I would call a community or general public demand, right? That's a big wedge of the pie. You have your impact litigation that's usually done by nonprofits, but also hand in hand with private attorneys. I mean, that's how impact litigation is done. And you have, like you say, pro bono. You have some people working inside big law firms making, big law money doing animal law, not pro bono, right? But let's look just for a moment at that wedge of public demand, let's call it. It is very clear, based on talking with the people who live this is their lived reality, right? That there is way more demand than can be filled in that particular area. So everybody that we talk to who was a small or solo animal law office, and let's park the question of, we're not just talking about that, but for this particular wedge, everybody said they get about 1,000 inquiries a year. Now, there's not even one of those in every state, right? But 1,000, let's assume for the sake of just conservative estimate, that there's about 1,000 inquiries that would come in each state every year. Those lawyers are only able to take a tiny handful of that. It's, a couple percent that they can even take on. And by the way, just as a little asterisk here from a business model point of view, they all said, if you're going to do that, you have to charge for your consultations because it's a huge percentage of your time. And you are really providing value, and you're really adding something, to those inquiries, because a lot of those people would not realize that the law is not really going to help them. It's not going to be an ROI.
Yeah.
But a lot of people do want to go forward and pay to be able to, for the principle of it, right? They're upset about what's happened, and it is a real, problem and injustice. So what we know is, let's say there's 50,000 cases. Let's say nearly all of them are not being handled. They don't even get to an attorney, let alone go through the process of a full-blown engagement. Now, we also know for those types of cases, there's about 3 matter types that come in the door that roughly speaking, comprise about 80% of the inquiries. So that would be dog bites, pet custody, and vet malpractice, and what I'll call like similar torts and contract issues. So three things. Those areas, they are certainly specialized areas, but they are not impossible to learn. They're not that hard to learn. Mm-hmm. We are in the editing stage of our dog bite stuff, and we're going to be doing vet malpractice next. And we're front loading some of these high demand areas as we've learned this. But there's also a finite list of the remainder of types of matters that come in, maybe some service dog stuff, maybe some landlord-tenant stuff, right? So it is not that hard to start incorporating these types of matters into either a full-time animal law practice or a practice that's doing other things and wants to take on animal law cases. So, I mean, a family law practice that wants to take on pet custody, right?
Right. I'm thinking particularly of a landlord-tenant firm, which I don't know, maybe it's not the same everywhere, but in New York City, that is a really specialized field. L&T lawyers, that's what they do. But it's really helpful for them to, rather than an animal law firm bringing in landlord-tenant, which in a place like that might be hard, mm-hmm. For landlord-tenant firms to bring in animal law cases, that's really powerful.
And what I would really love to be able to do, the value I'd really love to see ALPA providing, is educating those attorneys who are already really good at what they do about how to take the animal's interests into account, how to practice in a way that is looking at, sort of improving the lot of animals through this type of practice. It's so much more efficient to take somebody who, already has the legal skills. They already know how to be a lawyer. They're already sort of set up to do that, and say to them, you care about animals. I mean, I don't think we have a values mismatch in our society, in our world, right? And not to get like philosophical here, but like most people care about animals, right? It's like 97% of the population around the world, no matter how you do it, right? So I think our barriers are not related to values. They're related to just norms and practices and the sort of mundane things that we have to start lowering the barriers of entry for. But the one real takeaway point is that there is way more demand in terms of these public sort of, matters that come than is being met. So that's a huge area of opportunity.
Yeah, I wanted to say one more thing too, just because some people might not be aware, but when you were talking about dog bite cases, I would imagine a lot of the ones that you're talking about people might want to take, that people don't even know this whole part of the dog bite issue exists, are the dangerous dog hearings. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's not so much like whose homeowner insurance is going to have to pay for the bite. It's more what's going to happen to the dog.
Well, let me tell you, I knew nothing about dog bite law before I started doing this particular research. I talked to a lot of people who are really the experts on this and did a lot of research. And I am now radicalized on this topic, right? Because I don't think the law for dogs is fair to the dogs. No, I think that dogs
not even remotely.
They end up getting sort of thrown under the bus. They become kind of, a vehicle for people, increasing the amount of dollar recovery on there. But I will say, so the sort of basics is you have the dangerous dog and similar like vicious dog, nuisance dog hearings and determinations. There's a lot of opportunity for animal lawyers to come in, especially at the initial hearing level, because there are we're hearing, for example, Los Angeles, you'll get a ticket, let's say you have a dog, your dog bites somebody, you'll get a ticket from animal control and it will say, your dog has been determined to be dangerous. You don't need a lawyer, but you can come and appeal that. Well, it's not actually an appeal. It's just the initial hearing.
Seriously, been determined by whom?
Right. I mean, the level of just the constitutional issues that arise, the fact that people have no idea that they should get an attorney, right? And some of the basic evidence things that, I could tell you stories, another time about just how bad this ends up working out. And the reality is, when an attorney takes on a dangerous dog matter for the first time, they are going to be depressed at the end of it, right? They're going to be blindsided by how negative the room is, right? It feels like mob justice a little bit. Everybody wants to go after the dog. And we can help equip people to really understand how to get around that and how to do this well. Now, the nice thing is about the dog bite landscape is that most dog bites do not end up in dangerous dog hearings. But when they do, the likelihood that that's something, either draconian restrictions on the dog, right? Like these, cages, and they can't walk by the other person's house, and there's, all these fences and stuff like that, or death, right?
My favorite is when people have to get liability insurance that doesn't exist.
Okay, I love that. Okay, that's a wonderful segue, because my biggest takeaway from this is that everybody who cares about dogs, everybody who is part of the landscape in some way, that would be personal injury plaintiffs' attorneys, defense attorneys for the insurance companies, people who are in it for the animals, specifically, right? Dog owners, advocacy organizations, right? Anybody who is a stakeholder in the dog issue or the dog bite issue should be understanding and educating people about dog bite liability insurance, which is a standalone policy that covers animals regardless of breed, and it will cover a dog that has been determined to be dangerous. So what we have to look at with the civil situation, so we contrast the dangerous dog cases, which are directly implicating the outcome for the dog, but are a smaller number, with a huge number of civil dog bite matters, which are usually handled, as you say, by the homeowner's insurance attorneys versus a personal injury attorney on the plaintiff side. But there are opportunities for private animal lawyers to come in as well. But what happens is, we have seen in the last 15 years, something like a 200% increase in the number of these cases and the dollar amounts of these cases. So there is a real system that knows exactly how to get money out of these insurance companies. And so then the insurance company might settle. It might not even go to a legal matter, right? But the insurance company might settle this, and then they don't cover the person. They might even take their entire homeowner's insurance away, but they almost certainly are not going to cover the dog. So now that dog owner at the end of the day has to decide, are they going to be risking financial ruin?
Yeah.
Or are they going to get rid of their animal? And then what happens to their animal? Well, they're getting rid of a dog that has a bite history, right? So the answer to all of that, it's a win-win for everybody in this picture, is this specialized liability insurance, which most people know nothing about.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about it. I'm not sure the last time I talked about this, it actually even existed. That's really good news, actually. All right, we have already gone off on 5 tangents. So I want to talk about one of the topics that you've actually already focused on, and it was one that you mentioned. And the materials here are, I glanced at them and they're unbelievable. And that's the FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, and state public records laws, mini FOIAs. And this is now live. Anybody who wants to can join and get all of these materials. Tell us what they'll find.
Yeah, so I mentioned it's meant to be kind of like a to Z. Here's all the way from before you file all the way through the process. And we incorporated every exemption, every, piece of how do you do administrative appeals? How do you, do a fee motion, et cetera. So it's meant to be, I don't expect people are just going to sit down and read it like a book.
No,
I expect them to look at it more what they need.
It's not summer reading.
Yes. Although I would love it if you did. And then you could tell me what you think about it. But, a few things really stood out for me with FOIA. Unlike some other areas that we are covering, that we will be covering, it's a fairly easy on-ramp, right? It's not that hard to learn. A lot of us who are in the animal law field or generally in sort of related fields feel like we have some skill just from doing this in our day-to-day lives, right? Filing these, requests and kind of doing the administrative appeal process stuff. But you can, with very little investment, you can learn the basics of FOIA. And then you can get really interesting. It can get really complex, and you can get really strategic about it after it. One thing that I thought was fascinating was your Animal Law Podcast episode about Project of the People, which I think that's super interesting what they're doing, which is essentially exposing the kind of collaboration between the industry and the government agencies. I think there's probably a lot more opportunity to do that, but that's a great example of kind of masterclass FOIA work. Another thing that I think is a really nice thing about FOIA, which is somewhat unusual, is that the law is so well worn about fee recovery that it can really provide a nice entry point or a portion of a practice where people can start getting good at this and start being able to fairly reliably make money on these cases. But I think what's so interesting, if you look at the way FOIA has been used by the animal protection movement, you see 2 big things coming out of it, right? One is the animal protection movement is excellent at this. The skills that the animal protection movement has been forced to develop, right, because of the industry really not wanting the agencies to let you see what's going on, has really advanced FOIA law. And there are some agencies that most of their requests are coming from animal protection organizations. And then the other piece of it to me is, as a result of that, you see all of this industry influence in how FOIA requests are handled by the agencies. So you'll see like the kinds of bases for denying things, the kinds of training that the agencies are giving their FOIA officers is actually just being taught directly by these industry groups. I think there's some challenge opportunities there, but it's also, to me, just very enlightening. I think it says a lot about the impact of the movement, and the kind of the efforts that have been made and what can be built on from there, regardless of whether you think of yourself as sort of an activist attorney or not, right? Like there's just so much there.
Well, who would your clients be?
Nonprofits, journalists, individual activists. I mean, one thing, I think there's a lot of opportunity in journalism. I had a great conversation with Denise at Sentient Media about all of the FOIA, so that's their attorney there, about all of the, reporters that they work with, and they have all these big networks of people. And, I think there's a lot of value that collaborations between lawyers and journalists can provide, especially investigative journalists. I also think that's low-hanging fruit for more collaboration between lawyers and investigative journalists on things like litigation, because I don't think a lot of relationships are being developed there that could. So that may be like sort of an entry point to doing so.
That is really a great incentive. All right. So in addition to FOIA, you have an unbelievably long list of prospective topics. Are you sitting down and doing all of this, Cheryl? Like who's putting all of this together? It's like you could go to law school for 10 years to figure out everything that's in here.
We have a lovely help, right? So we are actually, Brooks Institute is wonderful, is investing the kind of resources and thought into this that I think is really great. So I am the director of the program. We also have a full-time attorney who is helping with this research. His name is John. He's wonderful too. We have a great advisory committee who comes in and looks at stuff and sort of guides us on things. And then we have some pro bono help, and we have some contractor and student help. So we're really putting a lot. I'll just say, everything I just said, when you go look at the website and you're like, oh, there's only a couple of things already published, I'll say always we have thousands more documents sitting around in folders that are not at the point of being polished. So always feel free to use us like a law librarian, right? Like, hey, do you have anything on this?
Oh,
right. People can definitely reach out to us and say, I'm interested in this topic. Who should I talk to? Who should I meet? Right. So as we're building there, you're not going to see immediately, this huge kind of, library of content, but we will be getting there, and we always have more than we have.
That's great. And, the best thing for any lawyer, of course, is to get the document that somebody's already filed, and just, it's not like anybody writes anything from the beginning. So having available other documents in similar cases that you can tweak is just like the most valuable thing ever.
I 100% agree with that. And I'm really trying to make sure that in our library, we do reflect it. Like we have actual briefs that are filed and things like that. Mm-hmm. But I also really want to make sure to encourage people, if they are doing interesting work or they know of interesting work that's being done, that it should be reflected. I mean, one thing that I felt, over the last 20 years is that there was so much cool things happening, on the animal law. We talked about the creativity and the innovation in this field. And I always felt like I almost learned about some of this stuff just by accident. Right?
Or possibly by listening to the Animal Law podcast.
Of course, right? I put a lot of effort into this. Yeah.
I mean, actually, the reason I said that is because I felt exactly the same way. There's all this stuff going on, and who knows? You don't even know about it. It's not like there's a local newspaper that covers animal law.
Right. And I think a lot of, we're a little bit orphans as animal lawyers, both in the animal protection movement and in the field of law, right? Nobody really knows what to make of it, which actually has a nice side effect, which is that I think the animal law community is one of the nicest, most supportive communities out there, right?
Totally.
We like to talk shop with each other. We're really happy to be helpful to each other, right? So I'm hoping that ALPA can be a real place for that. But I do think the level of substance and the level of why does this matter? What kind of strategy did this reflect? Often does get lost, right? So it's important to me to reflect the kinds of work that's been done, what's worked, what hasn't worked, what can be built upon. Hey, come tell me, like, I've always wondered why animal law hasn't tried this, right? Let's look into that more. And I think so we're directly inviting people to share their own work with us or to let us know about the work of other people, to make sure that that's all reflected. I mean, just also a little plug for Brooks Institute, we have the digest, and that I think is meant to be a pretty comprehensive way of catching what's going on. So absolutely, subscribe to the digest if you're not subscribed. But the idea of let's integrate the work that's being done into these topics so that they're actionable. It's all about practice. I really don't want to feel like we're just writing another textbook, right? So being able to say, hey, did you know so-and-so is doing this? Maybe we could try it over in this context. Maybe we should talk to this other attorney who knows nothing about animal law, but is really good at this other field, and we could work together on that. I think that's kind of where the magic happens. I think that's where we're going to see not just the growth and expansion of the practice of animal law, but we're going to see respect going across different fields of animal law and relationships being built that are going to start, building these formulas that are replicable.
I love that. And so important for people who are either doing solo or maybe they're the only person in their firm. Like, talking about cases is like how they get done. I mean, how you get new ideas. So the fact that this forum kind of exists, this informal forum. I mean, you also have a formal forum as well as an informal forum, which we'll get to.
Well, I will say something about that isolation point you made. So I mentioned when I talked to everybody that I talked to wanted to know how to make money doing animal law. The other huge thing that came up was feeling isolated. And it's surprising because, a lot of people are in communities that you'd expect them not to particularly feel isolated. Some of them are. Some of them are like, I'm the only person in my state who cares about this, right? Or like, I started this thing just to get people together to talk about this because I don't have anybody to talk about with it. But it's so interesting because there are hundreds of us out there who may have that same feeling of isolation. And then the third thing that came up over and over and over again was, I want to make sure that the work is high quality. I don't want the dabbler problem. And that, as I mentioned, there's a lot of similarity across people, regardless of skill level, regardless of experience, regardless of level of experience in animal law versus other types of law. They all care about that, right? Either they are worried they're going to screw it up or they're worried somebody else is going to screw up something that they understand and know about. So everybody wants to help each other. The number of people who've said to me, man, I wish I had somebody really committed that I could just mentor and teach all these things I learned the hard way, it's out there. So, it's almost like, in the beginning I was sort of saying, those pictures where they just combine a whole bunch of faces and then you end up with like sort of this pleasant looking face at the end that's sort of generic looking. That's what's going on here. We have these key features that are just showing up. Everybody's individual. Everybody has their own story, right? And their own priorities and individual characteristics and stuff, but they all agree on these few basic things, which I think we can really build from.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a real fear of what you call dabblers or just people's fear of getting things wrong because there aren't that many cases litigated. So each one becomes an important precedent, like if a precedent is made in a landlord-tenant case in another kind of situation, there are 10 billion cases on that topic, but there aren't that many of ours. So each decision in each case can really have an impact. So it is really important to get things right and to be communicating. The next thing I want to talk about, and I want to spend some time on it, but this is your next practice area, and it's not actually a practice area. It's about the whole topic of practice areas, the whole field, perhaps, and like letting people. It's an overview of rather than the substantive law. You're talking about the kinds of work that people can do, and that's going to be your next published piece, right?
Right. That's in final editing stage now, and I learned a ton in doing this process. It was important to me to represent not just the sort of extant field, but also what the work that has been done shows us about additional possibilities and opportunities, right? So, there's still, like I said, tons of room for creativity, but there's also tons of room for people who are going to be deep and narrow on certain things.
Yeah.
So yeah, one thing that, it's going to end up being kind of long and unwieldy, sort of like FOIA. But I think you can choose the things that are important and interesting to you. There are ways to approach how to make the question of how to make money doing animal law, or what is the practice models that support animal law, by first looking at what areas of law are people making money in anywhere, and what does it take to do that, right? So I said one way of doing this would be taking on the sort of public demand case areas, which the few topics you need to learn, and that's sort of a finite list. Another area of doing this would be to say, where are the cases where, there are significant attorney's fee recovery? Where are people making a lot of money, large class actions? We list a number of things: False Claims Act, SEC stuff, whistleblower law in general. Antitrust law has a huge, interesting, connection and history with this, and it continues to grow. There is a way, if you are the kind of person who has the commitment and somewhat sort of an intrepid nature here of bringing those areas into animal law. I mean, it could be the thing that starts a whole nother subfield within animal law, and you can end up having the kind of, career satisfaction, the level of intellectual depth, the level of, kind of innovative work, and you can make quite a bit of money. So that's one way to do it, is to become highly specialized. So we have a whole section in that talks about the laws that you can get recovery, whether attorney's fee recovery, or like enhanced damages and stuff. And some of that is the big federal statutes I just mentioned. Some of it is, tort law in certain states, right? Like the fact that animals can touch everything is helpful here, because maybe we just switch the inquiry and start with, what are the laws out there that are working, right?
Yeah,
and
and that have recovery for lawyers. I mean, that's so important. I know nothing about it, having always had a job with, the government. What do I know about making money? It was fascinating. And I do love, though it wasn't the focus, it's the only focus, but I just have always thought the False Claims Act has so much potential, especially like in research, and the amount of government funding that goes into unbelievably bullshit research and unbelievably bullshit everything, like on so many different levels. I just would love to see like people really seriously. I know there have been a number of False Claims Act cases, but pursuing, and that's serious money if you win.
Yeah. I don't mean to belabor the point, but I feel like false claims is a good illustration of kind of this phenomenon, right? Or this potential here. So most people who are bringing False Claims Act cases are doing so for healthcare fraud, right? There are people who are professional relators. There's extremely detailed law on this, right? They kind of know what they're doing. The law as written on the page applies to what we're doing. And like you said, there's been a good handful of cases that have interesting outcomes. Like, I loved working on False Claims Act cases. A lot of what it became was convincing people who knew this area of law that this application of it was legitimate, right? And then once you build those relationships, you can go back to them again and, build more relationships around it, right? So I think you can see that kind of, okay, well, it's working in this area. There's no reason, kind of on the face of the statute, that it should be limited to healthcare, or that, just empirically speaking, that is, right?
You cheat the government in any way whatsoever. Like it's not subject relevant.
So it's just a question of doing the work to build sort of brick by brick the way of doing that.
And you borrow standing from the government. It's like kind of miraculous.
You get to stand in the shoes of the government. Yeah, there's all these really interesting things, very old, Latin terms and all that stuff. But I think that is not the only example of this kind of thing. You can say the same thing about RICO. There's other things out there where you could do that. Now, I will say, and this is related to this, but I just want to make sure to emphasize this, because if there was one flashing neon sign thing that came out of the research that I did on, and that we all, worked on with a lot of feedback and kind of direction and help, it is the third-party litigation funding issue. And it popped into my mind when you said, well, I worked for the government. I don't really have a lot of familiarity with how the money change, kind of works in this.
Yeah, no, I have none. Please go into it. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's the case with, those of us like me who are nonprofits, are most of our background, right? So there are huge private equity, funds out there that will invest in litigation. Most people know that exists, but we put a lot of kind of depth into it because I think this is something that has huge potential. Now, again, go back to the pie chart. There's a relatively narrow slice of cases that are money cases, right? Cases where for top line, you actually can make significant money or recovery on these cases. For those cases, however, I think third-party litigation funding, which is the generalized term for these investors, has huge potential. So it's about $15 billion right now is invested in litigation in the United States, mostly on the plaintiff side.
And these are just investors who want to make money and see that there's a lawsuit, and they can provide the funds to bring the lawsuit, and then they get something back.
And you don't have to pay it back unless you recover. And it comes, almost in all cases, it comes out of the client's portion. So let's say you have a class action, you're still going to get your attorney's fees. It's going to come out of the client's portion of the recovery. Now, just to be clear, right? These people are in it to make money, like you said. But to me, if you were, my opinion on this is, and I'm sure others can differ, if you're in a law firm, the cost benefit analysis looks something like this. This case is going to cost, let's say, $3 million. Does the firm put that up so then they get the entire recovery on the back end? If you are in a small solo environment or a nonprofit environment, the question of whether you can put up that $3 million isn't even on the table, right? So it doesn't become an issue of, well, we could have gotten the whole recovery, right? Because they're going to get whatever, 4x or 3x their investment if you do recover. It becomes a question of, we can't bring this case unless we've raised all this money. So now it's just play money, right? It's just something that you can bring in. There's no downside. And what I've learned from talking with people, kind of on both sides of this is that it's often cultural, right? So the boards of nonprofits are like, do we really want to bring an investor in? But for litigation, I don't really see much of a downside. If it's the right case, and this could be the thing that actually gets it up and off the ground, you don't pay them back unless that money comes in, right? So how are you, how are you sort of seeing a major downside to that? Now, I will say two important things, because again, this is like my neon sign thing. Like if I had like elevator pitch with just everybody who's involved in animal law, right? I want them to know that this exists. So yes, it's money cases. There are some funds, smaller funds, that are also looking at impact, like public interest impact.
Oh.
So you can sometimes balance it out that way. It's not as aggressive.
How do they get paid? I mean,
there's still an investment. It's still a
non-recourse. There's still recovery. Yeah. It's just not as
it's not
substantial as if your interest is solely the money.
Correct, and the terms are less unbalanced, right?
Okay.
So the other thing is,
I'm sorry, I'm just so interested.
Yeah.
Money.
Me too.
Are they like our investment firms that are doing that? Are they cause motivated, or are they just, this is just another way to make money for them, and they happen to like be willing to fund this kind, or do they actually have an interest in the cause?
Most of the money is fully money, just an investment. For the funds that have that public interest component as one of the factors they consider, they are sometimes living inside a larger fund. So it's a dedicated amount of money that is meant to go with these sort of, let's say, public interest type cases. Or
it's an interesting investment for people, I mean, not like us, who have loads of money and who are looking to put forward animals, who care about animals, or whatever other cause it is, but care about animals and are looking for interesting ways. And law, I think, is one of the most interesting ways to be funding lawsuits. It's really, the payoff can be enormous.
There are smaller ones out there who are more mission-minded, but the vast majority of that money, that $15 billion, is coming through these private equity funds. Now, having done quite a bit of fundraising over the years, my initial thought was, well, is it the reality of getting like a large donor is a lot of relationship building. There's a lot of time that it takes to sort of sit down and find the match and all that kind of stuff. So it takes time. You have to be introduced. There's a whole process to go into fundraising, which seems like a big uphill battle. When it comes to these third-party litigation funders, It's not like that at all. They will talk to you tomorrow, right? Like if you're just going to send them your little write up, they're going to ask for more information if they want it, and then they're going to do a lot of analysis on the strengths of your case. They're going to benchmark your case compared to other cases. They're going to find a range that they think you're going to recover. They're going to come back to you and say, here are your weaknesses. Even if they don't go forward with the investment, they're going to tell you, like with pretty, clear analysis, what it was that was the problem. So it's very different in terms of how, the actual kind of financial incentives and the process itself is very different than raising philanthropic funding.
And very useful. I mean, like if they tell you everything that's wrong with your case, that's very useful information.
Yeah, we do live in a bubble a little bit, right? Like we all want to do these big cases where like, there's these sort of Hail Mary cases, and then they can kind of bring us to earth too.
Right. So. Yeah. Or if they're enthusiastic about it, that must be quite a shot in the arm. Like, because they're actually not in it for the animals. They're just in it for the money. That's a really good sign.
Right. And I will say one more thing, and this is a little nuanced, but again, for the Animal Law Podcast audience, I think this is useful to know. Even if you are not a big firm that's going to be trying to make tons and tons of money, right, on their cases, like, your typical solo is not going to be handling like a large class action by themselves, right? For example. You can still have eligibility for these kinds of funders because some of them will do something called bundling, where even though, I mentioned before, it doesn't come out of the attorney's fees portion of the case, or ethics issues there. In this bundling setup, they kind of get around it. So like, let's say you have a bunch of small cases, but they add up, and they add up to the low threshold of what these funds will invest in. You can say, I have 20 cases that I expect each of them to bring in, $100,000 or whatever. They can pay you up front. You can estimate your whole attorney's fee amount for those 20 cases, and they will evaluate them as a bundle and pay those attorney's fees. So that's, kind of an opportunity for smaller, solos, small firms, and smaller types of cases. So I just think it's something we go into a lot of depth about it. I don't need to keep going on and on, but I do. Once I get started, I really like this topic. But we do try to get you up to speed in our materials to see if there's, if it's something worth, the given reader.
Yeah, no, everybody needs to know this, whether they do it or not. They need to know what choices they have and what choices they should make. And I mean, as you said, obviously, if you're solo, that makes it harder, but the decision is yours. But even if you're at a firm, if it's something within your subject area, and you're not going to the firm asking, can you do this pro bono opportunity? You're going to the firm saying there's this case here, and this is the way we can fund it. I mean, that's a lot more attractive to most firms.
I think co-counsel is a huge through line in general in this practice models question, but certainly if you come, if you're a smaller outlet and you need to go co-counsel with a larger firm and you come with your own funding, I mean, that makes a huge difference. I just think in general, bottom line on this to me is there's already $15 billion being invested in general. Animal law is really not taking advantage of that. There might be a tiny percentage of that that's going to animal related cases, but I think with some education, we can start taking more advantage of it.
Do you think this would work even at large firms?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, is that, yeah.
I mean, you have to realize this is how a lot of litigation is being funded now.
Yeah. Right? I feel very stupid. As usual,
it was very eye-opening.
Follow the money. Follow the money. Just never forget that. All right. So what about pro bono? I mean, I assume you're not against it. You're just saying there's lots of other opportunities. What kind of pro bono cases are firms likely to be willing to take on?
Well, so pro bono obviously is a huge engine of animal law. I mean, there's a ton of people out there doing pro bono at every level and size. And, of course, it's highly, highly valuable. One thing that I think is kind of cool that I hadn't thought of until recently, there's a lawyer who's a member who said to me, I want to just start taking on animal law cases, but I'm not confident enough yet to charge people. So she's doing them pro bono. And then she came back and she said, hey, I just settled like 3 of my 5 cases. Now I'm going to start charging people. Like,
yeah, seriously.
That's kind of fun. But yeah, I mean, the larger firms obviously can really be kind of strategically powerful. Like in the broader picture, right, you can really kind of use larger firms for bono work in a strategic way. For example, I think in the FOIA context, my experience has been if you're having trouble, getting your documents, putting it on a letterhead of a huge firm, which is certainly something they may be willing to do, moves you forward in a way that, can, I mean, also highly specialized work. I mean, things like trademark, like those sorts of things, like that can be really excellent at a major firm. The area that tends to be a little harder is litigation, especially when they're actually, attorneys of record on the litigation, for conflict reasons, and a lot of it for positional conflict reasons. But there is so much else out there. I mean, like in-house counsel type work, and look at ADP. They have hundreds of clients.
Animal Defense Partnership.
Right. And they're providing a ton of pro bono work, hundreds of clients, and they're fairly narrow. I mean, they're doing basically in-house counsel work, right? And they're fairly narrow, and they have way more demand than you might have guessed. So it is out there, and it is also a nice way, I think, to build relationships with people to sort of try out animal law when they may not know exactly where they want to jump in.
And you also talk a little bit about government jobs, academia. I don't think we have time to go into all of that unless there's something in particular you want to talk about. But I just want to make sure that people understand they're like, you really run the gamut of all the possible opportunities you might want to be able to do. But one thing that you mentioned that I don't know what they are, and you said they were really important, so I'm going to ask you what they are. What are legal incubators?
Oh, okay. So there's about 60 legal incubators in the United States. We do not have one for animal law. And I just sort of threw it in there to just spark an idea. I think, of maybe somebody should put one like this together. But basically, it's what you might expect when hearing the word incubator. It's like a business incubator. It gives training resources, especially to an underserved area, to allow lawyers to get the kind of, management, mentorship, office space, even if there's a variety of them. The ABA has a guide on them. And it gets you up and off the ground. So the traditional incubator is going to be like basically legal aid. And you're going to be given the cases, and you're going to be given, probably office space and management and some of the operational support to just learn the law that way, take on cases, figure out how to be a lawyer. And I just sort of, was very intrigued when I learned about the existence of incubators and wondered, why haven't we really tried this? What would it look like? I mean, there's a lot of a variety among them, knowing that there's some really different cultural mindsets to come into animal law, and some really different specific skills to come into animal law. You could imagine designing an incubator to address and anticipate those things, so people don't either just sit on the sidelines scared to start, or start and get, burned out, or feel like they're not, able to sustain themselves. So I put that in there to hopefully spark thinking about it.
Well, it sparked my interest, even though I didn't know what it was.
60.
One thing about, sorry?
I said 60. There's already 60 out there, right?
Yeah, no, we need one.
Yeah,
we definitely do. Now that I've heard of it. One thing that's weird about animal law, like, we always talk about it as a practice area, but let's face it, it's not exactly a practice area. It encompasses every possible practice area. So your area of specialty in your legal work, assuming, you have a specialty, and virtually even the smallest firms, even the solos, have some specialties, because there's only so much you can do, because there's a lot of law, and no matter what you're doing, if you're going to be good at things, you have to specialize. Mm-hmm. So, another thing that you talked about was having a large dedicated animal law firm. How would that work? Like it would cover every possible specialty. Are we having a different department for each of those things? How does that work?
Yeah, that one's a little controversial. That was also meant to be somewhat, kind of evocative. I expect it to be a situation where the way that I picture it working is there's a lot of people who were basically solos who took on a variety of these types of cases, and then get together and are able to, toss ideas around, like have that, once a week meeting where they sit around and they go through their docket and figure it out. Because a lot of these people who are practicing just don't have that, right? They don't have that kind of opportunity. Now, would they be able to cover absolutely everything? No, I think this would make more sense for the kinds of things that are predictable. I mentioned that kind of finite list. By contrast, what I think ALPA would love, if this could happen, if we could be a part of this, is mainstreaming animal law to the point where it is there's an animal law specialist at every firm, right? There's, animal law sections are everywhere across the country, right? It's a thing that people think about. That I think, would really balance out. Like if you have highly specialized work, like you say, you can't learn every single area of law that touches on animal law. You can have people, and theoretically you could have some value by, kind of combining people who are really specialists on 9 areas, right? I mean, that's probably about the list of your general public demand. But you also need people out there in every area of law who know, in every law firm where there's somebody who knows, hey, an animal issue came up, how do you address it?
Like even boutique law firms that are really, really focused on one area and do not have a lot of lawyers, there'll be an animal case. I mean, you don't have to say, well, I can't work on animal law because I'm at this law firm that focuses specifically on this one statute.
Right.
Virtually any place you are, you can do animal law as long as you don't have to think of it as something you're doing full time. I mean, everybody should listen. Everybody who's interested in animal law should be thinking about how they can incorporate it into their practice, even if they're not going to totally change their practice.
100%. So, I mean, we talked about the process that it would take to do a full-time animal law practice. We talked about the process that it would take to get really specialized in something that, is more sort of groundbreaking or new. But I think the thing that is staring all of us in the face, and that is the easiest entry point, and maybe sort of the quietly, biggest opportunity that we can actually achieve, is many, many more people start infusing it into their day-to-day law practice, right? The concept of hybrid kept coming up as we were doing this practice models work too. So hybrid, the most obvious version of that would be some animal cases and some non-animal cases.
That's more practical for most people who don't want to change their whole life.
And there's no reason not to just start doing that, right? I mean, there's so many opportunities to do it. And really the valuable thing is all of these attorneys who are out there practicing has some sort of expertise that can be applied to animals, right? So if you can find that intersection point, that's the most important, I think, place to get started. And even to have a sustainable practice over time, even if that's 20% of your practice area, that doesn't mean that there won't be all these other pieces of the field out there. But I think that's the piece that absolutely, has a ton of value to add.
Yeah, no, that could be enormous. And a lot of it is just educating people. Like they don't realize that animal law is not just cruelty law prosecutions. Like they just don't realize that their antitrust practice they could actually get a big case or something, or their RICO practice, that there are opportunities there, and that they could be profitable as well. I mean, they could start by taking pro bono cases, perhaps like your friend did, and not charging, and kind of learn the ropes about how this relates to animals. But then there's a whole world out there of legal cases that should be brought.
Yeah. I mean, some of it is you can co-counsel, you can build those relationships. I feel like some of it is just sort of the small c conservative culture of law, right? Like if they feel like it's too novel, or they, don't have a long experience librarian doing it, they're not sure if it'll work. But sometimes you just look at what's already been done, right? And you say, oh, it has worked. Or you work with somebody who is a little more, has a greater risk appetite, and, oh, this works. Now we can use it as a replicable model for the future.
And well, that's kind of where ALPA comes in, isn't it? To create those connections.
Exactly. I want to be able to make the right conversations happen and give them the resources to say, oh, this is doable. This is not that hard to learn. Or if it is that hard to learn, what do I do about it, right?
Yeah.
There are certain areas of the law, like Endangered Species Act, I've heard now from multiple people, like, please do not let anyone try this for the first time by themselves. Right? So co-counseling is big. And, a lot of people who are out there doing this work very under-resourced in the nonprofit sector is like, we need good co-counsel. We need good local counsel. Like, that's really hard.
Yeah.
We need to have the
and that's no matter where you are in the country. There might be certainly Endangered Species Act. I mean, no matter where you are, there'll be animal law cases that are being brought by people from other places that have a nationwide presence, but they need somebody in your area.
Well, yeah, and I think one thing that only recently I became aware of is that another cultural distinction is that animal lawyers are used to just pro-hacking all over the place and consulting on things that are not in their state. And that's unusual for your typical practitioner. So those are the kinds of things.
And can be dangerous.
Yeah. Look at investigations work back in the day, like in the South. The first time I ever did a North Carolina case, it felt like I had to be like vouched for every step of the way. Like I needed a local attorney to be able to say all the right things and tell them it was okay. And I was a friend and all that stuff, right? I mean, there's really important cultural differences.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like going into a courthouse when you don't know anybody, it's not the way to do it. It's a very, I mean, no matter where you are, but especially in, smaller, mid-sized places, the atmosphere, no, that's not true. It's true everywhere. It's just very clubby atmosphere. And who you know is as important as what you know. As my mother used to say, and she was so right.
Well, I think that's the thing, right? We can all be specialists in our own way. And then it's just about finding that right formula.
Yeah.
It may not be clear to that typical, attorney. Let's say your prototypical North Carolina attorney may not have any idea what the value of their skills could be for animals, but they may really want to help.
Oh,
animals.
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, having those local connections is absolutely crucial. And this is how you create them. This is really, really, the potential is enormous. Don't screw it up, Cheryl.
I'm going to try my best, but I definitely invite people to come in and, be a part of this. Give me their stuff like that they want to be showcased. Give me their questions and problems and challenges and all sorts of things. So,
well, it is important. That is really important when you're starting something because you don't anticipate everything.
Right. And I did not realize certain things would just come up so repeatedly. Right. And I mentioned we're kind of in a bubble. I as we were talking before we started recording, I said, I just Googled around, like, what do people think about animal law? And I actually found this really, because I wanted to get outside the bubble, like what is the perception of animal law? And I actually did that because I think there are some unspoken or less spoken fears here, right? So not everything that we're talking about here is just smooth sailing and there's nobody has any concerns, right? I think people are worried about being perceived as unserious, right? That there's a certain amount of status loss that would come from admitting how much you care about the animal issues. And those are real fears. I think the reality is, like I said, animal protection in general is a weird thing because most people don't realize how much they are aligned with everybody else's values. They all think that they're the different one, right? But, I did want to know, like, okay, so what is animal law, the perception of animal law out in the world? And I actually was able to find a Reddit thread. It's from Canada, but I think it applies here. And I want to read you like a couple of the responses there.
It's exciting.
Super interesting, actually. So the question was just, what is the general perception of animal law?
Okay.
And some of them, it's a very small field. I'll be surprised if you could find enough work to support a full-time practice in it. It's not really a practice area. It's something relevant to a number of different areas of law. So I think of it as more of a marketing angle. It's very niche work. I don't think anybody views it poorly. It's important law. It's just that there's so little of it that there's no profit incentive for anybody to specialize or for the government to assign resources. This person says, I took animals in law school, very interesting course, but it was incredibly clear that it was niche and little to no people actually fully practice in animal law. That being said, I think it pops up in other areas and it's, quote, illegitimate in the sense that it isn't its own practice area and the term will elicit eye rolls for that reason.
Most of those were fairly legitimate. The last one was a little nasty. I think I think people think it's very small, and you're proving that it's really not. I mean, but I think that's a common perception. And I do think it's not exactly a practice. I mean, it's like children's law. It's not like it's a global focus on a certain kind of entity and the law relating to that. Like you can call that a practice area, but I don't think it's what most people think of as a practice area because that they're focused on a body of law. It's a very,
right.
This narrow area body of law. And it's not like that. But I think that those comments are they were not nasty. They were just naive about how much work there could be.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think that fears about, oh, well, people are going to think that you're silly or that you're not
Yeah, no,
intellectually serious.
not
I
hearing
don't think
that.
that's right at all. I think it's literally a matter of education. It's a matter of showing the work that can be done, of tapping into the traditions, in the law elsewhere, and of just kind of, dispelling those real, practical, factual myths. I don't think there is a values misalignment at all.
Yeah, I think the potential, an enormous amount of potential has already been filled, I think, considering where it was 10, 20 years ago and where it is now. But the additional potential is enormous. And now people are going to be making money. That's even more exciting.
Yeah.
Was there anything about it? Oh, upcoming forum. You said you had an upcoming forum that you wanted to
Yeah,
mention?
so as we're building this out, so we were wanting to wait until we had 5 full-blown topics in the resource library before we really shifted to a big outreach push. So
Did we mention what the other ones are? I'm not sure we did.
okay, so right now we have estate planning for animals up on there. We have false advertising. We have FOIA and public records that you mentioned, and then we're about to publish the practice
Okay.
models content, and then shortly after that, it will be dog bites. So once we have all 5 of those up, we will shift to much bigger efforts to bring more members within animal law and sort of outside of it, and to do other outreach stuff. And one of those things will be that forum where we really kind of serve the community, right? I don't know if that's outreach or like in reach. I don't know. But it's like that will be a place to showcase your work as well. I mean, we already have an events calendar. So if you wanted to post something that you have coming up, that's something you can do. A lot of animal law committees will say, we have these great webinars, but we don't know how to get people's attention to them. Like, put it on the events calendar, right? So it's more of that. And we want to have conversations going. We want to have little educational materials that will turn into CLEs, that will turn into eventually in-person things. So we really want to have people use this and take advantage of it being there. The other thing I'll say, as we do more of that outreach, I invite people now and increasingly in the future to put their names on a potential speakers list. And I don't necessarily mean just to speak to our own animal law community, but we will do the work to go out into non-animal law legal spaces and say, we think you should have a speaker that represents the animal angle on this particular topic. And we think it should be this person, this person, this person. Right?
That's great.
If you want to be on that list, if you know anybody who should be on that list, just tell me the topics. That way, as we can get out into the world and let people know, hey, this area of the bar, you guys should know about this.
And, they'll do it too because they're like, oh, that sounds cool. Everybody thinks that animal law is fun. They don't realize it's unbelievably traumatizing and hideous. But
Right.
They think it's cute.
Right. No, the facts can be horrifying. But also,
actually, one of your first practice tips, I'm sorry I interrupted you, but I noticed was like a mental health break. I mean, take care of yourself. It's so true. But anyway, continue with what you're saying.
I think it comes down to knowing yourself, right? The kind of stress. So all of this, we talk about cultural differences across different fields of law. One of the ones here is I think you have to have this entrepreneurial mindset, right? I mean, some of the things we've talked about, including the Reddit thread, right, is there's this perception that it's like there's no clear path, right? People say to me, if I were to do a different area of law, I would know exactly what classes to take, exactly what internships to do, right? Exactly what jobs to get. And then it would just sort of go from there. Like you have to have this more entrepreneurial, like, yes, you can take what's already been done and draw from it, but you really have to know yourself, right? So for me personally, I'd have a really hard time talking to hundreds of people, across the course of a year and not being able to take on most of their matters. But other people would have a really hard time, watching undercover investigation footage, right? I prefer the stuff that, isn't people crying on the phone. Like, some people are really good at that. And the people who do that and do it well, they are just so committed to keep going and to, to really do the work and what needs to be done and kind of the tenacity that takes. If that's you, like jump into that. If that's not you, there are other things you can be doing that are not so front.
There are so many different things you can be doing. So many.
That's hopefully what we're helping people understand in this, because we don't want people to say there's no place for me.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. There is place for everybody. And as I said, your piece, which people, if they join the the program that will be available to them. Goes into a lot more than we were able to today. One thing before I let you go, what about law students? Is there going to be a place for them?
We are not right now including law students because we feel like there's a lot of resources for them.
Yeah.
What tends to happen, I think, is there's a lot of excitement in law school, and then you see a lot of drop off once people are in their careers. So we're hoping to pick up on that and help people, especially
that makes total
people
sense.
too.
Yeah. But, maybe there could be some cross-pollination too between the student animal legal defense fund chapters and local lawyers and whatever.
Yeah. And I mean, of course, the types of speaking events that we'll be doing and all that stuff, I'm sure will hopefully include students. Also, always opportunities for students to do, pro bono work for us, or, we could do internships, things like that. So that's always an opportunity too. We've got some excellent students doing some work on this.
That's
really,
great.
really
That's
creative
great.
stuff that, I'm very impressed by. So that's crucial too. So always opportunities there.
I'm sure that loads of people will be joining and checking things out and learning more than we were able to share today, even though we shared a lot. So thanks so much, Cheryl, for being here telling us about it.
Thank you, and thank you for joining. I'm really excited.
I'm excited. I'm not litigating anything though. Just want to make that clear.
That's okay. We want your wisdom. So.
Oh, well, all right, for whatever that's worth. All right. Well, that was a very nice way to end. And I hope you're still here. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I think this was like a really exciting episode. So remember to subscribe, like, comment on your favorite podcatcher on YouTube, and catch our next episode of Rising Anxieties. That's on Tuesday. And we'll see you next time.